The light outside our window is bleeding from a pale, bruised violet into the cold, dense grey of a late autumn twilight. We sit perfectly still, watching the long, intersecting lines of the highway below us, where headlights flicker like a stream of distant, luminous cells moving toward destinations we will never see. On the desk, our laptop screen casts a cold, unflattering glare across our faces, illuminating the soft, exhausted lines around our mouth and the heavy, unblinking stillness of our gaze. We are looking at a digital profile, a photograph of an old acquaintance from college, or perhaps an old flame we walked away from 5 years ago. They are standing in a sun-drenched garden in a city we used to dream of inhabiting, holding a child we never met, or celebrating a professional milestone that we once drew up as our own ultimate objective. A heavy, hollow ache opens up directly behind our breastbone, cold, vacuum-like sensation that feels as though a vital piece of our internal anatomy has been quietly extracted while we weren't looking. We do not close the tab. We sit there, letting the digital blue light wash over our fatigue. As our mind begins its nightly, familiar descent into the infinite, paralyzing multiverse of regret. We are physically present in this room, inside this body, beneath this roof, but our spirit is light years away, wandering like a restless phantom through the ghostly corridors of the lives we left behind. We live in a historical moment that has institutionalized the torment of the unchosen path. Never before in the history of our species has the human animal possessed such radical visibility into alternative versions of its own existence. We don't just live our lives anymore. We hypervigilantly audit them against thousands of parallel realities running concurrently alongside our own. From the moment we are old enough to scroll, we are bombarded with the curated highlight reels of billions of other human trajectories, each one serving as a silent, aggressive question mark leveled against the validity of our own choices. We are told by a hyper-individualistic, achievement-obsessed culture that we can be anything, do anything, and live everywhere, turning the beautiful gift of human agency into a catastrophic burden of infinite liability. We have internalized a collective neurosis where every choice we make is met not with celebration, but with an immediate, corrosive wave of grief for the alternatives we had to murder in order to make that choice. We buy a house in the suburbs and spend our evenings mourning the artistic life we could have had in the city. We commit to a beautiful, deeply loving partner and find ourselves haunted by the wild, unscripted freedom of our single years. We choose a stable corporate career and spend our days weeping over the entrepreneurial empire that exists only as a dusty draft in our imagination. The profound tragedy of this modern psychological framework is that we are living our entire existence as starved, mournful farmers inside a magnificent ghost orchard. If we look closely at our immediate reality right now, we will see that we are actually standing in the center of an extraordinarily beautiful plot of ground. The orchard of our current life is alive, smelling of damp earth and sweet resin. The branches of the trees we have actually planted, watered and tended, are bowing low under the immense weight of ripe crimson apples, waiting to be plucked, tasted, and enjoyed. The fruit is right there, within arm's reach, bursting with juice, completely real and ready to nourish us. But we refuse to touch it. We do not reach out our hands, we do not open our mouths. Instead, we spend our entire life force standing at the edge of the fence, our knuckles white as we grip the wooden slats, staring out over a barren, empty field of weeds, weeping with absolute, inconsolable bitterness over the invisible blossoms of the trees we never planted. We have turned our minds into a museum of phantoms, worshipping the beautiful, unblemished ghosts of our hypothetical futures, while our actual, living reality is rotting on the vine from sheer, unadulterated neglect. The absolute exhaustion of this collective haunting is the silent, invisible weight that we carry into our modern days. We walk through our lives with our heads turned permanently sideways, our eyes casting anxious, backward glances toward the periphery rather than looking straight ahead at the path beneath our feet. We are never fully anywhere. We are halfway into our current jobs, keeping our resumes permanently updated and our ears open for the next headhunter, terrified that if we settle down, we will miss a better wave. We are halfway into our current relationships, keeping an emotional suitcase packed by the door, analyzing every minor argument as a potential sign that we chose the wrong person and should have stayed with the one who got away. We are halfway into our current cities, refusing to unpack our boxes or hang pictures on the wall, treating our actual home as a temporary transit lounge while we wait for our real life to begin elsewhere. We live in a state of chronic, toxic emotional dilution, spreading our attention so thinly across a dozen parallel timelines that we have completely lost the capacity to feel the deep, rich flavor of the one timeline we are actually occupying. We are performing a slow, systematic act of psychological starvation, sacrificing the exquisite, raw vitality of the current hour for the sake of an electrical illusion called what-ifan illusion that grows more intoxicating the more our real life demands our presence. What if our entire understanding of regret is a structural hallucination? What if the other path, the one where we took the job across the ocean, the one where we married the college sweetheart, the one where we threw caution to the wind and became the artistis not better, more beautiful, or more fulfilling than the life we have right now? What if its only virtue is that it does not exist? The mind is a brilliant, deeply deceptive storyteller. It takes the real, flawed and messy present, with its monthly bills, its routine Tuesdays, and its uncomfortable arguments, and it compares it against a flawless phantom life that has never had to face the friction of reality. The phantom life doesn't have to pay taxes, it doesn't have to do the laundry, it doesn't experience long dental appointments, and it never has to navigate the slow, boring decline of aging. It exists only as a perfect, hyper-stylized movie trailer running on a continuous loop inside our cerebral cortex. Let us sit together with the profound, breaking fatigue of this endless comparison, not trying to fix it or plan it away, but simply acknowledging the immense, crushing weight of trying to live 1,000 imaginary lives at the expense of the one precious existence we have been granted, as we begin to open up the deep, physical mechanisms of our self-inflicted exile. To map the precise structural architecture of this internal exile, we must observe an archetype that has become the dominant psychological nervous system of our hyper-connected world, the figure of the ghost walker, the non-committer, the permanent dweller in the hesitant orbit of existence. This is the version of us that has turned the refusal of choice into a lifelong defense mechanism against pain. On the surface, this archetype can appear incredibly dynamic, open-minded, and rich with unfulfilled potential. They are the individuals who read everything, maintain a dazzling array of diverse interests, and seem to keep all their professional and creative options perpetually open. They speak fluent languages of multiple career paths, collect skills like rare stamps, and pride themselves on their ability to pivot at a moment's notice. They are the ultimate chameleons of the modern landscape, fascinating to watch, convincing everyone around them and most dangerously, convincing themselves that they are simply waiting for the perfect alignment of stars before they strike their true, definitive stake into the ground of reality. But if we descend beneath this glittering surface of boundless possibility and look through the lens of a deeper, more clinical anatomy, we discover that this hesitant orbit is actually a frozen chamber of immense, silent torment. The ghost walker is not driven by an excess of freedom. They are paralyzed by a profound, unexamined terror of limitation, finitude, and ultimate death. Deep within the cognitive cellar of this archetype lies a hidden, calcified belief that says, as long as I do not commit completely to this job, this person, or this city, I can keep all other parallel futures alive forever. To choose one path is to murder all other versions of myself. They treat their life like a high-stakes poker game where they refuse to ever play a single hand. Sitting at the table for decades with their cards pressed tightly against their chest, completely oblivious to the fact that time is the blind dealer that is systematically draining their chips with every passing minute. They are keeping their options open at the cost of keeping their soul completely closed, living a life that is wide on paper but profoundly thin, hollow, and untasted in reality. While the conscious intellect is busy framing this paralysis as a form of high standards or artistic complexity, our physical body is quietly keeping a precise, devastating record of the immense structural strain required to live as a phantom. The body never lies. It cannot inhabit a parallel universe. It can only exist in the absolute concrete coordinates of the present space. When we perform a detailed somatic mapping of the ghost walker, we see that the regret of the unchosen path has physically warped our muscles, turning our stance into a permanent posture of physical retraction. The first major center of this somatic deformation can be felt directly in the neck and the gaze. If we bring our awareness to the alignment of our head right now, we might notice a subtle, chronic rotation where the skull meets the cervical spine. The neck is rarely pointing completely straight ahead. It is held in a permanent, microscopic turn toward the side. This is the physical orientation of a creature that is walking forward while hypervigilantly looking backward, or scanning the periphery for a different escape route. The eyes do not land fully or deeply on the object directly in front of them, the document on the screen, the face of the child, the eyes of the current partner. Instead, the gaze is light, skittering and evasive, constantly darting toward the margins, searching for an exit sign or a more lucrative reflection. This chronic lateral strain keeps the suboccipital muscles at the base of the skull in a state of permanent ischemic clenching, cutting off the free flow of blood and neural signals to the brain, causing a low-grade, constant buzzing of mental static that makes deep concentration completely impossible. From the neck, this lines of tension travels downward, wrapping its cold fingers tightly around the rib cage and suffocating our lung capacity. When we live as a ghost walker, we carry a permanent, hollow ache directly behind the sternum, a physical sensation that feels as though our chest is a haunted house filled with cold, moving air. Our inhalations are shallow, guarded, and restricted entirely to the upper third of the chest cavity. We are terrified to take a deep, full-bodied inhalation that expands the ribs down to the lower back, because a full breath requires us to fully occupy the raw reality of the present body. The shallow, guarded breath keeps the intercostal muscles locked in a protective cage, signaling to our nervous system that we are in a state of perpetual emergency. We complain of a chronic weight on our chest. We feel an inexplicable sorrow rising in our throat during quiet moments, and we experience a deep existential air hunger that no amount of physical exercise can satisfy, because our lungs are physically keeping score of all the lives we are actively mourning. The most paralyzing manifestation of this somatic locking is localized in the pelvis and the feet. If we focus our attention down through our legs right now, we will notice that our physical weight is held disproportionately high, compressed into the chest and throat, while the lower half of our frame feels empty, ungrounded, and spectral. When we stand or walk, our weight is shifted back toward the extreme back edge of our heels, never rolling forward onto the balls and front pads of our feet. This is the posture of a person who is ready to jump backward at the first sign of friction, a stance of absolute non-committal. The feet do not touch the earth with a deep, trusting intimacy. They hover over the ground like phantoms, treating the current room, the current kitchen, and the current street as a temporary transit lounge. This lack of grounding deprives our legs of their natural, spring-like elasticity, turning our movements into a heavy, dragging struggle, leaving us permanently exhausted before the day has even begun, because our lower limbs are physically dragging the dead weight of 100 imaginary lives through the dirt. This physical tightening feeds into a vicious, escalating psychological feedback loop that turns our minds into a permanent courtroom where we are continuously prosecuting our past selves for the choices we made. The mind develops a highly sophisticated distortion mechanism known as romanticized projection. We take a choice we made 5 years ago, such as leaving a particular city or ending a specific relationship, and we scrub that memory clean of all its actual historical friction. We forget the loneliness we felt in that city. We forget the toxic arguments that broke our heart in that relationship, and we replace them with a hyper-stylized golden myth of absolute perfection. We then use this completely fraudulent myth to bludgeon our current reality, comparing a real flawed Tuesday afternoon with its traffic, its bills, and its routine laundry against a beautiful phantom timeline that has never had to face the unyielding weight of time. This is the ultimate tragedy of the ghost walker. We are using the galcussi of the only life we actually have this immediate. Precious Brathto pay rent on an imaginary apartment in a parallel universe that exists nowhere on Earth except as a collection of firing synapses inside our overheating brain, completely blind to the reality that while we are busy haunting our ghosts, the magnificent, ripe orchard of our actual life is quietly dying of starvation right beneath our frozen feet. To dismantle this exquisite, multi-layered hallucination of parallel lives, we must bring the sharp, uncompromising clarity of the Buddha's insight into the very center of our internal theater, using it like a surgical blade to dissect the illusions that keep us hovering in mid-air. 2,500 years ago, a man sat on the bare ground, looked deeply into the mechanics of human regret, and diagnosed the exact cognitive error that causes a brilliant mind to turn its present life into a graveyard of phantoms. He did not describe this as a moral failing or an intellectual weakness, but as a structural delusion born out of the mechanism of attachment. What he called Upadana concept he laid bare through the timeless understanding of the second arrow. When we make a choice in this life, we are immediately struck by the first arrow of reality. This first arrow is the absolute unyielding law of limitation and impermanence, what the Buddha called anicca. To be a human being, bounded by a physical body and moving through linear time, means that to choose one path is to decline another. Time moves in only one direction. Our feet can only step on one path at a time. Our hands can only hold one other hand at a time, and our presence can only occupy one geographical coordinate at any given second. This is the first arrow, the beautiful, terrifying finitude of human existence. It is the simple truth that you cannot be an international corporate executive in Tokyo and a quiet organic farmer in France at the exact same moment. This limitation is clean, it is neutral, and it is the necessary boundary that allows any choice to have actual meaning, beauty, and texture. Without the boundary of death and limitation, no choice would matter, and no fruit would ever ripen. But the modern mind, intoxicated by the illusion of infinite visibility, refuses to accept this natural limitation. Instead of tending to the wound of our finite nature with tenderness, the ghost walker reaches into their own internal quiver, pulls out a second arrow, and drives it with immense, screaming violence directly into the exact spot where the first arrow landed. This second arrow is our mental prosecution of our past choices. It is the internal judge that loops endlessly through our thoughts, roaring, "Why did you walk away from that opportunity? If only you had stayed in that other relationship, your life would be a masterpiece of absolute fulfillment right now. You have made a catastrophic mistake, and you are trapped in an inferior reality." If we look closely at our lives, we will see that the grief that is breaking our spirit is never caused by the actual path we are walking. It is entirely inflicted by the devastating infection of the second arrow. The first arrow is the simple choice. The second arrow is the violent, desperate refusal to let that choice have consequences. We turn a perfectly peaceful, ordinary Tuesday afternoon into a private torment of self-flagellation, sitting in our current kitchen while our minds violently whip us for failing to live 1,000 parallel lives simultaneously. We mistake this regret for high sensitivity or romantic depth, completely blind to the reality that the alternative path we are mourning isn't better, it simply does not exist anywhere in the universe except as an electrical ghost in our cerebral cortex. To understand why we are so addicted to shooting this second arrow of regret, we must perform a radical anatomical dissection of the ultimate illusion that rules the ghost walker's mind, the concept of a singular, perfect destiny. The ego looks at the path of life and believes that there is one secret, optimal timeline where we would have achieved perfect, unbroken happiness, and that our current life is merely a flawed consolation prize because we made a wrong turn somewhere in our past. We treat our destiny like a delicate glass vase that we shattered 5 years ago, and we spend our days sitting in the dirt, weeping over the broken pieces, trying to reconstruct a ghost. But the Buddha introduced a revolutionary, liberating insight that cuts completely through this core anxiety, the realization of non-self, or anatta. He revealed that the self we are trying so desperately to satisfy across multiple timelines is not a solid, static monument that can find a permanent home in any career, relationship, or city. The self is not an archive to be perfected. It is a fluid, continuous, and ever-changing river of thoughts, sensations, perceptions, and responses that is completely reborn with every single breath. Because your inner nature is a river rather than a stone, there is no single optimal path that could ever provide you with an absolute, unbroken state of security. If you had taken that other job across the ocean, if you had married that alternative lover, or if you had stayed in that dream city, you would have carried the exact same unawakened mind with you into that golden timeline. Within 6 months, the novelty would have dissolved, the routine would have settled in, and the same underlying friction of existence, same internal anxiety, the same fear of missing out, and the same hunger for something else would have awakened inside that parallel universe. You would be standing in that sun-drenched garden in Tokyo, looking over the fence at a digital screen, mourning the quiet, simple life you could have led if you had stayed in the exact room where you are sitting right now. The golden path does not exist because all paths, no matter how magnificent they appear from a distance, are bound by the same universal law of unsatisfactoriness if the mind within them remains fragmented. The phantom life appears perfect only because it has never had to face the unyielding weight of reality. It doesn't have to navigate a wet, freezing morning when the car won't start. It doesn't have to manage a slow, painful argument about finance with an exhausted partner, and it never has to watch its own skin grow old and fragile in the mirror. It is a bloodless, sterile projection that we use to terrorize our living, breathing present. When we bring the light of direct awareness into this mechanism, the courtroom of our regret completely collapses. We see that things do not fall apart in our current life because we made a wrong choice. Things have friction because friction is the very fabric of physical existence. A wave does not apologize for breaking upon the shore. A tree does not apologize for growing only in one spot of earth, and a human life does not need to apologize for being finite. The moment we realize that every single path is an arena for awakening, the heavy burden of our parallel universes drops away into the dirt. The ghosts dissolve back into the light, and we are finally permitted to stand up, look straight ahead, and plant our feet fully into the sweet, damp loam of the one exact life stream that is running through our veins in this immediate second. To transition from the intellectual clarity of dropping our parallel universes into a lived, blood and bone transformation, we must enter the visceral training ground of our own somatic architecture. This is the exact coordinate where our ancient evolutionary neurology must be rewired by the steady, gentle discipline of embodied presence. We cannot think our way out of regret because the intellect is the very engine that manufactures the phantoms. We must train our nervous system to feel absolutely complete, rooted and secure right here, inside the narrow, unblemished boundary of this exact room and this single trajectory. This architecture of transformation requires us to master 3 distinct daily inner disciplines that allow us to prune our ghost trees, bring our lateral gaze back to the center, and cultivate a fierce, ecstatic devotion to the one life stream running through our veins. The first foundational pillar of this real-world alignment is the systematic practice of severing the lateral gaze and dropping the phantom weight. Because the ghost walker archetype has spent years pulling our life force out into the periphery, leaving our necks turned and our weight compressed high in our chests, we must perform a deliberate somatic intervention to ground our physical mass into the earth. We engage this practice whenever we feel that cold, vacuum-like ache of regret opening up behind our sternum, or when our eyes begin to skitter restlessly across digital screens, tracking the alternative choices of others. We begin by bringing the full light of our attention directly into the core of our neck, right at the base of the skull, where the suboccipital muscles have been clenched in a permanent lateral twist. We consciously invite the head to turn completely straight ahead, aligning our chin perfectly with the center of our breastbone. We let our eyes drop their searching, hyper-vigilant scanning of the margins, allowing our vision to narrow gently down into the immediate foreground, landing with absolute weight and clarity on whatever object is sitting right in front of USA wooden tabletop, a glass of water, or the bare skin of our own palms. We look at this object not to analyze its utility, but to receive its presence, letting its concrete reality anchor our racing thoughts. From the centered alignment of the head, we breathe deeply into the haunted house of our chest. We do not take a shallow, defensive breath that stops at the collarbones. As we inhale, we consciously allow the ribcage to expand outward in all directions, letting the air soften the locked intercostal muscles, filling the cold, empty spaces behind the sternum with a warm, radiant awareness. And as we exhale, we deliberately let our weight slide out of the penthouse of our intellect, dropping down through the spine, past the pelvis, and rushing all the way down into the front pads and balls of our feet. If we are standing, we consciously press the pads of our toes into the floor, feeling the immediate, rock-solid resistance of the earth rising to meet our frame. We shift our balance away from the back edge of our heels, where we have spent years hovering like a ghost ready to retract, and we plant our weight squarely in the absolute center of our footprints. We feel our legs become heavy, alive and rooted. We are teaching our nervous system a radical form of physical commitment. The somatic realization that we are no longer in transition, we are no longer waiting for a better option, we are finally here, fully occupying the exact coordinates of our physical destiny. This somatic grounding opens the space for our second discipline, the sacred rite of mourning and pruning the ghost trees. The mind believes that if it keeps all its options open in its imagination, it can keep all futures alive. We must shatter this illusion by performing a deliberate mental pruning, recognizing that for a single branch to grow strong and bear real fruit, the dead wood of what if must be consciously cut away and allowed to die. Once every week, we sit in deep, uninterrupted silence, drop our weight into our lower belly, and bring the parallel universes that haunt us most deeply into the center of our internal theater. We visualize the alternative life where we took that job across the ocean. We look at the face of the lover we walked away from. We see the city we never inhabited. We do not look at them with anger, nor do we run away from the pain of their beauty. Instead, we look at them with immense, boundless compassion. We speak to those ghosts quietly within our thoughts, saying to them, "I see you. You are beautiful, you are perfect, and I honor you, but you belong to the unmanifested sky. I release you, I let you die so that I may live." As we utter these words, we mentally visualize a massive, clean pair of pruning shears, cutting the invisible energetic cords that have bound our heart to those alternative timelines. We watch those phantom cities, those unchosen careers, and those ghostly lovers dissolve slowly into smoke, their energy returning to the vast, open space of awareness from which they were born. We feel the sharp, clean sting of this mourning a sorrow that is clear and beautiful, because it is rooted in reality rather than neurosis. We are clearing the soil of our consciousness. We are refusing to let the sap of our living tree be drained away by invisible phantoms. We let the ghosts die completely, leaving our internal orchard clean, empty, and ready to pour all its vital nutrients into the single sovereign branch that is growing right here in our actual room. This clearing leads us directly into our third and most ecstatic discipline, the active cultivation of radical presence in monogamy. This is the art of full-bodied, unshielded devotion to the current landscape of our existence. It is the understanding that the ordinary, uncurated elements of our daily routine, our current job, our current kitchen, our current relationships, and our current boring Tuesdays, they are not a consolation prize, they are the supreme arena of our spiritual awakening. We begin to practice this monogamy by bringing an intense multi-sensory engagement into the most mundane tasks of our day. When we wash the dishes at the kitchen sink, we stop mentally planning our next career move or wondering how our life would look if we had a more luxurious kitchen. We drop our awareness entirely into the raw physical sensations of the current hour. We feel the scalpel-sharp heat of the water running over our wrists. We listen to the rhythmic, scraping sound of the sponge against the porcelain. We smell the clean, sharp scent of the soap. We watch the iridescent bubbles expand and pop on the surface of the plate. We bring such an absolute, fierce focus to the washing of the dish that the dish becomes the center of the entire universe. There is no other path. There is no other city. There is no other life. There is only the magnificent, glowing reality of this single plate being cleaned by these two warm hands. When we sit across from our current partner, we stop auditing their flaws against the romanticized, mythic ghost of the person who got away. We drop our comparisons completely, and we look at the real human being sitting before us with unshielded eyes. We notice the tiny, unique lines around their eyes when they speak. We listen to the exact timbre of their voice. With all its human limitations and vulnerabilities, we feel the physical warmth of their hand resting against ours. We embrace them in all their flawed, messy, and concrete reality, recognizing that their beauty lies precisely in the fact that they are real, that they are here, and that they have chosen to stand in this specific orchard with us to face the unyielding weight of time. By practicing this radical devotion to the immediate foreground, the chronic delusion that has kept our lives feeling thin and hollow completely vanishes. We stop editing our existence and we start tasting it. We discover that when we pour our entire soul into a single coordinate, the narrow boundary of the present moment expands into a boundless horizon of infinite depth. We no longer need 1,000 imaginary lives to feel rich, because we have discovered that a single, unshielded breath taken in the absolute center of the present hour carries enough flavor, enough vitality, and enough raw magic to satisfy the hunger of 1,000 lifetimes. When we finally cease the frantic, phantom-driven warfare against our own history, a profound, cool stillness descends across the parched and fragmented landscape of our consciousness. This stillness is not the hollow, dead quiet of an abandoned highway or the heavy numbness of a mind that has simply given up on its dreams. It is the vibrant, fragrant, and utterly unshakable peace of a real orchard in full bloomer radical presence monogamy that requires zero alternative realities to confirm its absolute completeness. The heavy, low-grade ache of regret that has spent years humming like cold air behind our sternum dissolves into a spacious, luminous clarity. We look around the immediate parameter of our room, and for the first time since our youth, we are fully, completely there to inhabit the space we occupy. The physical world rushes back into our awareness with an exquisite, breathtaking intensity that reveals our old, non-stop parallel timelines to be nothing but bloodless, digital illusions. The texture of the evening light hitting the wall feels remarkably dense and alive, casting long, golden shadows that slowly paint the floorboards. The sound of distant traffic below, the hum of the refrigerator, or the rhythmic breathing of a loved one sleeping nearby are no longer dull reminders of a routine existence, but a magnificent, spontaneous symphony playing across the open field of our senses. When we sit at our desks or stand in our kitchens, we can look straight ahead without any internal pull toward the periphery, completely free from the toxic compulsion to audit our current coordinates against a ghost. Our physical body rests deeply in this newly reclaimed territory. Our neck is perfectly straight, our toes press firmly into the rug, and our breath drops effortlessly into the dark, warm center of our abdomen, moving like a slow tide that has finally found its true and absolute shore. This is the state of radical presence monogamy, the deep, somatic realization that your actual, flawed, and uncurated life is not a consolation prize or a wrong turn, but the supreme and ultimate arena of your awakening. We have returned to the single, sovereign branch of our own physical destiny. We have stopped demanding that the universe preserve every hypothetical future in a jar of amber, and we have allowed ourselves to discover the immense, rich flavor of the life stream running through our veins right now. We see that when we cut away the dead wood of what if, we are not losing our potential, we are allowing the deep sap of our consciousness to flow with maximum velocity into the one path beneath our feet. We can close our digital tabs, we can lay down our memories of the lives we never lived, and we can look at an ordinary, unscheduled Tuesday evening with a sense of quiet, unshakable dignity, knowing that this single, concrete coordinate is enough. In the beautiful, uncompromising literature of the deep insight tradition, the Buddha continuously points away from the frantic cravings of the ego hitch, seeks to possess all timelines, and attach itself to 1,000 phantoms and directs our focus toward the precise, unyielding reality of the present moment. He reminded his followers that liberation is never found by trying to build an endless fortress out of imaginary options, but by completely penetrating the immediate truth of where your feet are currently planted. He invited us to look beyond the glittering mirages of our parallel universes, to put down the heavy burden of our romanticized regrets, and to find the deep, unconditioned peace that exists when we finally stop haunting ourselves. The twilight outside our window has given way completely now to a deep, starless night, washing the room in a quiet, velvet darkness that feels immensely restful and secure. The highway below continues to flow with the steady, luminous movement of 1,000 headlights, but the sight no longer triggers that cold vacuum of longing inside our chest. Those travelers belong to their own streams, and we belong entirely to ours. The laptop screen sits dark and dark on the desk, its blue light extinguished, and our hands rest completely relaxed on our thighs, open, heavy, and empty. The modern world outside will continue to flash its neon signs of infinite visibility, trying to seduce us back into the torment of hyperchoice and phantom comparisons. But the ghostly spell has been completely broken. We have turned our neck straight ahead. We have allowed our alternative futures to dissolve back into the open sky, and we are finally ready to walk forward into our days with the fierce, ecstatic devotion of a soul that has chosen to love its reality. If you finally stopped haunting the corridors of the lives you never lived, if you dropped the second arrow of regret and poured your entire, undivided soul into the exact coordinate where your feet are standing right now, who would you be in this very unshielded second?